Diner owner fired waitress for feeding. Hungry child. The boy's father returned with FBI agents. Did you just give that boy free food? Emily Carter froze, still holding the now empty plate that had moments earlier carried two golden pancakes, a few strips of bacon, and a warm glass of milk. He was hungry, and he was alone. Carl Jennings, the gray-haired owner of Jennings Diner, loomed over her with narrowed eyes. You don't get to decide that, Carter. You stole from me. Get your things and leave. You're fired. Under the pale flicker of the diner's old fluorescent bulbs, Emily untied her apron and hung it carefully on the hook beside the employee break room. She didn't argue. Not because she agreed, but because she couldn't afford to cry. Not in front of the child still sitting at the corner booth, looking at her with wide, frightened eyes. It had been a slow, rainy afternoon at Jennings Diner, the type of day when the scent of coffee and bacon hung in the air like a comforting blanket. Emily, 28 years old and working a double shift, had just served the last of the lunch crowd when the doorbell chimed and a small figure appeared through the glass. Soaked head to toe, the boy looked no older than 8. His jacket clung to him, dripping steadily onto the tiled floor. He didn't speak when he entered, just slid into the corner booth and clutched his stomach. Emily approached him gently. Hey, sweetheart. You all right? Are you hungry? The boy looked up, brown eyes wide and frightened. I'm lost, he whispered. I was with my dad. I can't find him now, and I'm really hungry. She nodded and offered him a smile, the kind she'd perfected through years of struggle, gentle, warm, reassuring. Don't worry, kiddo. Let's get you something to eat first. Emily didn't think twice. She used a return plate that hadn't been touched, reheated it, and set it in front of the boy. She added a warm glass of milk from the kitchen. He ate quickly but politely, pausing only to say, Thank you. That was when Carl Jennings came out from the back. The confrontation was loud enough that a couple of truckers in the back booth turned their heads. Emily stood tall, but her cheeks burned with embarrassment. Carl didn't care. He called her a thief, accused her of costing the diner money, and ordered her out. I'll call the police to help find your dad, she whispered to the boy whose name she now learned was Lucas, before walking into the cold rain. She didn't know that act of kindness would be seen. She didn't know who Lucas was. She just couldn't let a child go hungry. But someone else would know, and someone very powerful was already looking for Lucas. Emily stepped into the gray drizzle outside, her breath fogging the air. She stood for a moment under the rusted awning, arms wrapped tightly around her worn-out canvas purse. Her heart beat like a slow drum in her ears. Behind her, through the fog glass, she could still see Lucas watching from his booth. She pulled her jacket tight and turned toward the corner where the payphone stood. Most people didn't use it anymore, but she had no choice. Her phone was out of minutes. Dropping in 2 quarters, she dialed the local, non-emergency police line. While the phone rang, she thought of Sophie. Sophie, her 5-year-old daughter, was probably finishing up her nap at daycare. Emily's shift was supposed to last another 3 hours. She wondered if she could still pick up Sophie in time now that she didn't have a job to go back to. Non-emergency police line, how can I help you? Hi, Emily said, voice low. There's a little boy at Jennings Diner. He says he's lost. He's about 8. His name is Lucas. Can someone come help him? Is the child in immediate danger? No, he's safe. Just scared. I gave him food. Then I got fired. There was a pause. We'll send an officer. Can you stay with him until someone arrives? I can wait across the street. The owner doesn't want me inside anymore. Emily hung up and crossed to the small bench beside the bus stop. She sat there in silence, rain dampening her coat. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, a patrol car pulled up beside the curb. Officer Ramirez, a young woman with a soft voice and calm eyes, walked into the diner and emerged a few minutes later with Lucas. The boy looked relieved but confused. His eyes searched the street until they found Emily. He waved. She waved back, managing a small smile. That night, Emily sat at her kitchen table with a calculator and a notepad, trying to find the magic number that would keep her and Sophie afloat. Rent was due in 12 days. She had $187 in her bank account. The heat bill sat unpaid on the counter. The job listings she'd printed out were sparse and all demanded experience she didn't have. One rejection email had already come through. In the adjacent room, Sophie was coloring quietly at the coffee table, humming to herself. Emily closed her eyes. She remembered Lucas's face, the way he had clutched the milk with both hands, the whispered thank you, and she wondered if she'd ever see him again. She didn't know that just a few miles away, someone else was thinking about her too. Marcus Thompson was pacing the waiting room of the police station, his coat soaked and his expression stormy. He had retraced his steps a dozen times after losing sight of Lucas for only a minute. 1 minute. That's all it took. When the front desk officer finally brought Lucas out, Marcus dropped to one knee and pulled him into a fierce hug. "I'm sorry, Dad," Lucas murmured. "I tried to get back to the hotel. I got lost." No, Marcus said firmly, holding the boy's face in both hands. "I'm the one who's sorry. I shouldn't have let you out of my sight." Lucas told him about the woman at the diner. "She gave me food, even though her boss yelled at her. She got in trouble because of me." Marcus frowned. "She helped you and she got fired." Lucas nodded. Marcus pulled out his phone and began typing. "What was the name of the diner?" "Jennings," Lucas said. "She said her name was Emily." Marcus Thompson wasn't just a father. He was a special agent with the FBI stationed temporarily in Minneapolis to lead a task force investigating local financial crimes. For the last 6 months, he had followed the money trails of a suspected laundering ring that used small businesses as fronts, restaurants mostly. The name Jennings Diner struck a chord. He had seen it on a watch list once flagged for irregular tax filings and suspicious cash transactions. He had brushed it aside, a low-priority lead with no immediate evidence. Until now. Marcus looked down at his son. "We're going to make sure she didn't lose her job for doing the right thing." The next morning dawned with a pale gray sky pressing down over St. Paul. Emily sat on her worn-out couch, dressed in the same uniform pants and sweatshirt she had thrown on the night before. A half-cold cup of coffee sat beside her, untouched. She had barely slept, mind tangled in calculations and fears. She had applied for 4 jobs overnight, none of which paid enough to cover rent and daycare. Sophie woke early and padded into the living room, in her footy pajamas carrying her stuffed bunny. "Mommy, you're not going to work today?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. Emily forced a smile. "Not today, baby. We're having a special day together, okay?" Sophie beamed. "Can we draw?" "Of course." They spent the morning coloring, reading, and playing with blocks. For a few hours, Emily forgot the sinking weight of uncertainty, but it returned quickly when she checked her email and found another rejection. At exactly 12:17 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Emily frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. She crossed the room, peeked through the peephole, and froze. A tall man in a dark overcoat stood in the hallway. He had close-cropped black hair, an angular jaw, and an air of quiet authority. When she opened the door a few inches, he offered a faint smile. "Miss Carter?" "Yes. I'm Marcus Thompson. I believe you helped my son yesterday." Emily blinked. "Lucas." He nodded. "Yes. May I come in?" Still unsure, she glanced at Sophie, who was now watching from behind the couch. "I'm sorry for just showing up," Marcus added quickly. I wanted to thank you. And I have something for you." She hesitated, then opened the door. Marcus stepped inside, glancing around the modest apartment. It was clean, well kept, filled with signs of love and effort, a small artificial Christmas tree in the corner, handmade ornaments with glitter and pipe cleaners, and a blanket fort halfway collapsed on the carpet. "You gave my son food," he said. "You called the police, and then you got fired." Emily shrugged, embarrassed. "I just couldn't let him sit there hungry. He said he was lost. He looked scared. I did what anyone would do." "No," Marcus replied, his voice quiet but firm. "Not anyone. He sat in that diner for nearly an hour. No one else said a word to him. No one offered help. Except you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim white envelope. "This isn't charity," he said. "It's something Lucas insisted on. Inside is enough to cover your rent and expenses for the next month." Emily's hands trembled as she accepted the envelope. I don't know what to say." "Say yes to something else," Marcus said, removing a second envelope from his coat. This one bore the seal of the U.S. Department of Justice. She looked at it, confused. "I'm part of the FBI," he explained. "We're headquartered temporarily in downtown Minneapolis. My team is short-staffed and we're in desperate need of administrative support, filing, scheduling, records management. It's not glamorous, but it pays well. Full federal benefits, health insurance, and flexible hours. I already spoke to HR. If you're interested, the job is yours. Emily stared at him, stunned. You're offering me a job, Marcus smiled. I'm offering you a second chance, because you gave one to my son. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. Yes, I mean yes. I'd love to. Sophie, who had wandered closer, tugged on Emily's sleeve. Mommy, who's he? Emily laughed softly through her tears. He's someone who wants to help us. Marcus crouched down to Sophie's level. Hi, Sophie. I'm Lucas's dad. He told me you're really good at coloring. Sophie nodded proudly. I made a rainbow giraffe today. Well, I'd love to see it sometime. Later that afternoon, Emily visited the FBI field office in downtown Minneapolis. The building was sleek and modern, its lobby filled with agents and analysts in crisp attire. But the atmosphere felt warmer than she expected. Marcus introduced her to the staff, and within the hour she was given an ID badge and an orientation packet. She would start Monday. That night, for the first time in months, Emily slept without fear. Sophie curled up beside her, murmuring dreams of snowmen and Christmas cookies. 2 days later, Marcus sat in a conference room at the FBI office reviewing data on a secure laptop. Across from him, Special Agent Karen Mendoza sipped her coffee. I ran a preliminary sweep on Jennings' diner like you asked, she said, sliding over a folder. You were right to be suspicious. Carl Jennings has been under the radar for years, but his tax filings are a mess. Large cash transactions with no source documentation. Several shell vendors on his purchase records. He's not the big fish, but he's definitely part of the food chain. Marcus nodded slowly. He said Emily stole from him. For giving a kid a meal. Well, now he might be facing federal charges. So who's stealing now? Mendoza said, arching an eyebrow. Marcus tapped the folder. Let's put him under formal surveillance. I want financials, contacts, everything. Loop in treasury crimes. If this diner is part of the laundering ring we've been tracking, we finally have a direct link. You got it. Later that week, a black SUV with government plates pulled discreetly into a parking space near Jennings' diner. 2 agents in plain clothes entered separately, ordering coffee and taking mental notes of every customer, every cash transaction, every time the register drawer opened, and no receipt was printed. Emily returned to Jennings' diner only once. It was early Sunday morning. She stood across the street looking at the windows fogged by steam and time. Inside, Carl Jennings stood behind the counter serving hash browns to a tired couple. He didn't notice her. He didn't see Sophie standing beside her in a red coat holding her hand. Emily didn't go in. She didn't need to. She had moved on. That afternoon, Marcus invited Emily and Sophie over for dinner. Lucas set the table proudly. The children laughed together, building a Lego spaceship on the living room rug. After dinner, as Marcus poured coffee and the kids chased each other in the hallway, he said quietly, Emily, I don't believe in fate, but I do believe some things happen because they need to. What you did that day, it matters. Emily nodded. I didn't think it would change anything. I just didn't want him to be hungry. Sometimes, Marcus said, that's enough to change everything. Emily arrived at the FBI field office Monday morning with a mix of nerves and quiet determination. She wore her best blouse, clean, though slightly faded, and a pair of slacks that had seen better days but were neatly pressed. Her hair was tied back, her notepad tucked under her arm, and her eyes carried that soft resilience of someone who had been told no too many times, but still showed up anyway. Agent Karen Mendoza greeted her with a firm handshake and a warm smile. We're glad to have you on board, Emily. Marcus told us what you did for Lucas. That kind of instinct kindness under pressure, you can't teach that. Emily blushed and murmured her thanks, quickly absorbing the layout of the office. Her desk was small but sunlit, tucked into the corner of the admin wing. She spent the day learning the FBI's record system, organizing personnel files, and sitting through security briefings. The hours flew by. Each day brought a little more confidence, and soon she began picking up small tasks outside her role. Agent Mendoza noticed. You think like an investigator, she said one afternoon. Maybe you should consider training as an analyst. Emily had never dreamed of a career in law enforcement, but now the idea sparked something inside her, something that had been quiet for years. Purpose. Meanwhile, Marcus and his team deepened their probe into Jennings' diner. Treasury flagged Carl Jennings' accounts as high risk. Thousands in cash flowed in every week, but expenses and reported income didn't match. Shell companies linked to construction businesses funneled money through vendors on the diner's books. The pieces began connecting to a larger investigation Marcus had been building for months, a regional laundering operation that moved dirty money through mom-and-pop restaurants, bait shops, and repair garages across the Midwest. Jennings' diner, it turned out, wasn't just a greasy spoon. It was a cog in a quiet machine of white-collar crime. Back in the office, Emily had no idea she was helping build the case with her quiet efficiency. One afternoon, she sorted through a batch of procurement reports when something caught her eye, a vendor name on a receipts file from Jennings' Diner Northland Supply Co. She remembered that name from a separate folder Marcus had handed her earlier in the week regarding unrelated shell corporations. She printed both records and brought them to Marcus. "I don't know if this matters," she said, "but this supply company billed both Jennings' Diner and one of the bait shops flagged by Treasury. The totals are identical to the cent, and they're dated 2 hours apart." Marcus blinked. "Emily, that's exactly the kind of thing we need." "Great work." That evening, the team gathered in a closed-door strategy session. Emily was asked to sit in. "What we're seeing," Marcus began gesturing to the map on the screen, "is a circular laundering structure. Local businesses, usually cash-heavy, are inflating purchases from dummy vendors. Those vendors don't exist. Or if they do, they're empty offices with P.O. boxes. We've tracked over $800,000 funneled through 5 businesses in the past 6 months. Jennings' Diner is now confirmed as one of them." He turned to Emily. Thanks to a very sharp set of eyes. The agents clapped. Emily flushed. Marcus approached her after the meeting. "You ever think about working in investigations full-time?" "I don't even have a degree," she said. "Doesn't matter. You have instinct and heart. That's rare." The next morning, agents served a federal warrant on Jennings' Diner. Marcus stood at the door as Carl Jennings opened it, startled by the presence of 6 officers in plain clothes and 2 agents in jackets marked FBI. "We have a warrant to search these premises and seize business records related to financial fraud and tax evasion," Marcus said. Carl sputtered. "This is a mistake. What are you talking about, Mr. Jennings? Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law," said Agent Mendoza, stepping forward with the documents. Inside the diner, employees watched in stunned silence as officers boxed up paper ledgers and hard drives. One cook removed his apron and walked out. The dishwasher leaned against the wall wide-eyed. Carl's face flushed red as the reality settled in. "Is this because of that girl?" Carter Marcus met his gaze. "No, this is because of you." The news broke across local headlines within hours. Jennings' Diner owner under federal investigation. Reporters swarmed outside the field office. Emily stayed inside her badge, clipped proudly to her collar. But her story had already gotten out. A local journalist named Isabel Carter, a cousin distantly though they hadn't spoken in years, wrote a piece titled, "The Waitress Who Wouldn't Walk Away." It went viral within days. Donations poured in. Sophie's Daycare waived tuition for 2 months. A restaurant downtown offered Emily a consulting role. The community that had once ignored her now held her up as a symbol. But for Emily, the biggest reward wasn't public. It was Sophie's voice one night as they sat on the couch and watched the snow fall. "Mommy," Sophie whispered, "I'm glad you helped that boy." "Me too, baby." And she meant it. The following week felt like a dream. Emily adjusted to her new job faster than anyone anticipated. She was organized, reliable, and asked smart questions. Her name quickly became known not just in admin circles, but among agents too. People stopped by her desk to drop off files and left with thoughtful insights they hadn't considered. Marcus wasn't surprised he had seen her potential from the beginning, but even he found himself impressed by how seamlessly she fit into the team. Meanwhile, the FBI's case against Carl Jennings accelerated. With the diner shut down and its books in custody, forensic accountants uncovered decades of off-the-books transactions. What began as suspicions of minor tax evasion expanded into a full-blown financial crimes investigation. Carl's Diner had served as a pass-through for laundered money, tied to construction kickback shell companies, and even narcotics profits, all beneath the nose of the community. Springfield had never seen such headlines. For locals, Jennings' Diner had been a fixture. Some felt betrayed. Others defended Carl, saying he'd always helped out when someone needed a meal. But as more details emerged, public sentiment shifted. Carl hadn't just hidden his profits from the IRS. He had knowingly allowed criminal elements to wash money through a neighborhood institution. People began questioning what else they didn't know about the businesses around them, and they began remembering Emily. One morning, a group of mothers from the neighborhood showed up outside the field office with a gift basket. Muffins, fruit, thank you notes drawn in crayon by their children. For Miss Emily and her daughter Sophie, one note read, "Thank you for being brave." Emily was speechless. But she wasn't the only one changed by what had happened. Marcus, once reserved and focused solely on operations, found himself looking forward to the quiet conversations he shared with Emily after work. They talked about their kids, about grief, about second chances. It had been a long time since either of them had felt truly seen. Lucas and Sophie became inseparable. Weekends were now filled with trips to the park library, adventures and pancake mornings hosted alternately at each other's apartments. Emily and Marcus didn't speak of what was growing between them, not yet, but the warmth was there. It filled the spaces between words. One afternoon, Emily sat in on a case debriefing with Agent Mendoza and Marcus. They were reviewing transcripts from a confidential informant linked to a construction company. Emily listened quietly, taking notes. When the meeting ended, she lingered. "May I ask something?" "Of course," Marcus said. "This shell vendor, they mentioned Blue Ridge Supply. It appeared once in a file I processed last week. Same P.O. box as Northland Supply, just under a different name." Mendoza blinked. "Are you sure?" "I'll double-check," Emily said, already logging into the system. Within minutes, she pulled up both records and placed them side by side. The tax ID numbers were off by one digit. The mailing address matched exactly. "Good catch," Mendoza said. "This could tie two laundering pipelines together." Emily grinned, but then paused. "I don't want to overstep." "You're not overstepping," Marcus said. "You're solving crimes." That night, he walked her to her car. "You're really good at this, Emily. I never thought I'd be part of something like this," she admitted. "For so long, I just thought I'd be stuck." "You're not stuck," he said. "You're rising." Back at the field office, the team finalized charges against Carl Jennings. Federal prosecutors now had enough to indict him not only for tax evasion and money laundering, but for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The case would go to court in the fall. In the meantime, a coalition of small businesses gathered at Town Hall. They had seen what happened to Carl, but instead of being afraid, many were inspired. They wanted to create a community coalition focused on transparency and ethics. Emily was invited to speak at the first meeting. She stood nervously at the podium, wearing a blazer that Mendoza had loaned her. The room was packed: shop owners, teachers, churchgoers, even teenagers. "I'm not a lawyer," she began, "or an agent. I'm just someone who did the right thing even though it cost me. But that act, it changed my life. And I think it changed something in this town too." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, people lined up to thank her. One elderly man pressed a small coin into her palm, an old challenge coin from his time in Vietnam. "For courage," he said simply. As summer approached, change continued. A developer offered to buy the old Jennings Diner lot, but the city blocked the sale temporarily. Inspired by Emily's story, residents proposed transforming it into a public space, a memorial garden honoring quiet heroes. It passed unanimously. Emily, who had once cleaned the very floors of that diner, stood beside Marcus at the dedication ceremony, holding Sophie's hand. A plaque was placed in the center of the garden. It read, "In honor of those who feed the hungry, speak for the silence, and act with courage when no one else will." Autumn arrived with gold leaves and a crispness in the air that seemed to carry with it a sense of reckoning. The town of Springfield, once quiet and overlooked, had become the setting of something remarkable, a transformation sparked not by protest or policy, but by a single act of compassion. Emily Carter was now a recognized name, not just within the FBI office, but also among civic leaders, teachers, parents, and business owners. Yet she remained humble. She still packed Sophie's lunches in reused bags and still walked to work when the weather allowed. Fame wasn't what moved her, dignity was. On the morning of Carl Jennings' arraignment, Emily arrived at the courthouse early. She hadn't planned to attend, but something in her heart told her to be there. Marcus was already inside, sitting in the third row of the gallery, expression unreadable. Carl Jennings entered through the side door in a navy suit that looked 2 sizes too big. His hair had thinned, and the bravado that once colored his every move was gone. His eyes searched the courtroom and settled briefly on Emily. He didn't look angry. He looked defeated. The judge read the charges: tax fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, falsifying federal documents. Carl pleaded not guilty, but the evidence stacks of it was unflinching. During recess, Marcus walked over to Emily. "You didn't have to come. I know," she said, "but I needed to see it through." Later that day, the prosecutor presented the timeline: how the diner had been used for over a decade as a conduit for criminal transactions. The financial records Emily had helped trace became part of the official exhibit list. It wasn't vengeance that Emily felt. It was closure. 3 weeks later, Carl Jennings accepted a plea deal: 7 years in federal prison, full forfeiture of his assets, and public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. He gave a short statement in court: "I thought I was untouchable. I thought the small things didn't matter. Turns out the smallest act of decency brought it all down." The courtroom remained silent as Carl was led away. And just like that, the chapter closed. But for Emily, something even more personal was opening. That evening, Marcus invited her and Sophie over for dinner. Something simple: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie. Lucas had helped set the table, and Sophie brought a small bouquet she had picked from the garden beside the memorial. After dinner, as the children played in the living room, Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee and joined Emily on the porch. "You ever think," he asked quietly, "how strange it is that one meal changed everything?" She nodded. "I do. All the time. You saved Lucas that day," he said, "but I think you saved me too." Emily looked out at the dusky sky. "We saved each other." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the sound of laughter drifting from inside. In the weeks that followed, Emily began taking night classes in criminal justice. The FBI, impressed by her continued contributions, offered her a path toward becoming a full-time investigative analyst. Marcus mentored her. Mendoza championed her. Her world had changed, but she never stopped being herself. Each Sunday, Emily still made pancakes for Sophie, now joined often by Lucas. They added strawberries when they could afford them, chocolate chips when they couldn't. Gratitude came in many flavors. On the 1-year anniversary of the incident at Jennings' Diner, the Memorial Garden hosted a small community gathering. Marcus gave a speech. Mendoza gave thanks, and Emily stood at the podium holding Sophie's hand. "I didn't set out to change anything," she said. "I just saw a hungry child and did what I hoped someone would do for my daughter. That moment could have ended badly. I lost my job. I felt hopeless. But what I've learned is that kindness isn't a weakness, it's a spark. And once it catches, it spreads." People rose to their feet, not with cheers but with tears, the quiet kind that say, "We understand." The plaque in the garden now had another inscription beneath it, in memory of the small act that changed everything. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus approached her, took her hand and smiled. "What's next for us?" Emily laughed softly, resting her head on his shoulder. "Whatever we make together." And together they stepped into the next chapter, not because fate demanded it, but because kindness had made it possible.